pay attention. Just pay attention. Just start to recognize the miraculousness of every moment and everything that shows up in your life. And even the fact that you can take a breath and that who you are is here now at this time in an infinity that has no beginning and no end, that you showed up. Pay attention. Notice the trees. Notice the clouds. Notice the worms. Notice the birds. And as Maslow said, see the unfolding of God in everyone that you encounter. Pay attention. Be astonished. Just go through life being astonished. Rumi put it this way. He said, sell your cleverness and purchase bewilderment. Get rid of your intellect and just go through life bewildered.
Wayne Dyer was an icon in self-development and spiritual growth. He wrote over 40 books with an astonishing 21 New York Times bestsellers. His childhood was spent in orphanages and foster homes, but he'd go on to inspire millions and become known as the father of motivation. In this exclusive speech from the Celebrate Your Life stage, Wayne Dyer shares with us the keys to live in the present moment, achieve real change, and become truly extraordinary. Special thanks to Liz Dawn for partnering with us to release this exclusive content on our YouTube channel. Enjoy.
What I would like you to do is to, there's a great teacher back in the 10th century, a Sufi teacher, his name was Talopa. He said, have a mind that's open to everything and attached to nothing. So what I'll be asking you tonight is to really have a mind that is open to things that you may never have considered before. At this age that I'm at now, at 71, I find it's fascinating to look back at some of the things that have occurred in my lifetime. And when they show up, when they're happening to us, or to me at least, I'm not aware that they are part of a larger tapestry, a larger picture. But when you get to a certain place, you can look back and see how this particular event led to this event, and that occurrence led to that, and this insight led to that insight, and on and on and on goes that looking back hindsight kind of thing. And it's still happening. It's still happening for me right now. I got this new device that my kids got me. It's called an iPad, and I've only had it just a few months. And I don't know how to work hardly any of it because I write all my books by hand, and I have the same editor that I've had for 37 books, since 1971. That world of computers and so on. My oldest daughter, Tracy, loves to tell me that how much fun it is for her just to go to the airport for entertainment and to watch people in my age group try to just get on a plane. You mean I have to stick this thing in there, and then what happens now? Nothing is working, and I don't know, and it's invariably I need someone to come over there and help me to touch different buttons and so on. But one of the things that is on there is something called Facebook that I don't know anything about, and I've been informed I have like 700,000 friends on Facebook that I don't even know how to get it. I said, well, how do I get Facebook? Do I just type Facebook, and does it? So they tell me how to do these things, and I turned that thing on the other day and pushed the slide button, and up came my something on Facebook. I don't know what it was, but I was on there, and it had my name on it and listed all my friends, but didn't list them all. And there was a notice at the top of the sheet on the screen for somebody had just said, there's a book that you have to read. To me, Dr. Dyer, you must read this book. It's absolutely essential that you read it. What that means to me is that there's two things operating here. One is that I just turned this machine on, and it happens to go to something that I don't even know how it got on there. My kids must have been playing with it or something, but so that's number one. And number two, then there's a letter to me and a book that's somebody's from France who is a physicist who has written a book about how to change the future through time travel. How to that the recognition that here we are, and I've been reading this book all day, and I'll get off of it in a few minutes, but it's just spooked me out because when these things happen, I just finished a book. I just spent a year on a book, and I just did a public television special on it, and I recorded it, and I worked on it 5-6 hours a day every single day for 7 or 8 months. I'm not ready to write another book. But when these kinds of things happen for me, and I'm speaking to all of you, that when these sort of alignments begin to show up in your life, that it's really important to pay attention to them, because you'll get to a point later on in your life, which is now, because the future and the present and the past are just all illusions. It's all now. And at this moment that we're all in here right now was at one time a future in your past. And this moment that you're in right now is also a future, and this is that past. So this moment is really a future and a past. And they can't communicate with each other, the future and the past. I told you it's strange. The only way they can communicate with each other, your past and your future, is through your present. So your past can't get a hold of your future. The only way it can get a hold of your future and help you to change it, and literally, and I mean change it, and I know this to be true because what I was reading today is so aligned with what I've just completed and what I'm going to be speaking about tonight. This whole idea that we have within us the capacity to use our present moment to alter any future that might have even been our dharma, might have been something that we signed up for, might have been a direction that we were headed. That when we begin to recognize that when we put our attention on what we would like to be, and then the universe starts aligning in such a way that the kinds of things that I just described to you, turning on this iPad, which I didn't even have 2 months ago, and having a thing show up, and then having a note to me from somebody in France telling me about a French author who has written a book about how to go into time and literally change what you may have been destined for, or the direction that you are headed, and that you can do it like instantaneously. And one of the most important ways that we do it is in our sleep, particularly as we prepare ourselves for sleep to enter into our subconscious mind, all of which is coming up in about an hour. But the reason I say this to you is because when this kind of thing happens, this is what I know about myself now at age 71, is that when things like that happen, I know that I will be... This is just the very beginning stages of my writing something and uncomplicating, because that seems to be what my life mission has been about, which is taking complicated, difficult things for most people and putting it into terms that people understand. My teacher, when I was a young doctoral student, was Dr. Abraham Maslow. Dr. Maslow died on the 8th of June, 1970, at almost the same instant, within an hour of the time that I was walking across the stage in Detroit at Cobo Hall to receive my PhD. And my whole doctoral study work was on self-actualization and higher consciousness, and how average people can achieve that. And it was almost as if he taken these concepts of self-actualization and higher awareness and talking about that there are people who are extraordinary in virtually all facets of life, and that all of us are really programmed for extraordinariness, but we unfortunately have allowed ourselves to be ordinary. And he talked about these behaviors and ideals and thought patterns and things that separate out and differentiate people who reach these exalted levels of consciousness, who are able to do what Jesus said in the New Testament, that even the least among you can do all that I have done, and even greater things. I've always just taken that literally, that we're all capable of these miracles, but we don't often recognize that old Sanskrit saying that when the student is ready, the teachers will appear. The problem is that the teachers are appearing all the time. They're everywhere in everything that we do, and many times we don't even recognize who they are. Mother Teresa once said that every day I see Jesus Christ in all of his distressing disguises, so that person begging on the street might be your greatest teacher, or even the person sitting next to you that you didn't even know before, or that you met on the way in, or whatever. There's a wonderful poet. Her name is Mary Oliver. She wrote Wild Geese, my all-time favorite poems. They ask her, what is it that differentiates out people from higher consciousness and the rest? She said three simple things. She said, my advice always, and she was born the same year I was. She lives out in Cape Cod, written many, many great books of poetry. You'll hear a lot of poetry tonight. I've been writing a lot of it myself. She said, if I had to give any advice to people, it would be this. Number one, pay attention. Just pay attention. Just start to recognize the miraculousness of every moment and everything that shows up in your life. And even the fact that you can take a breath, and that who you are is here now at this time in an infinity that has no beginning and no end, that you showed up. Pay attention. Notice the trees. Notice the clouds. Notice the worms. Notice the birds. And as Maslow said, see the unfolding of God in everyone that you encounter. Pay attention. Know that this world that you're in, this physical body that you're in, is not who you are at all. Pay attention. And number two, she said, I would tell them, be astonished. Just go through life being astonished. Rumi put it this way. He said, sell your cleverness and purchase bewilderment. Get rid of your intellect and just go through life bewildered. That's something that has happened to me in the last 7 or 8 months, particularly since I've had this diagnosis of leukemia, which I know most of you know about since ABC did a special on it with me in it. I was just sort of telling this reporter a little bit about it, and that became the whole focus. But it's been a great blessing at any rate. But miracles have been showing up in my life, that some of which I'll share with you the details of, because there's no better place to do it than here. I did it on the PBS show, but it'll be interesting to see what they allow on. I told a story that they already cut of how when people give you negative information that you don't want to hear, and how you should just put it in. Like, this wonderful thing about the iPad is that I love this thing, is that it has a little button on there called trash. I just think that should happen in life. I mean, I would like to have one of those. So that every time somebody gives you any information that you don't want, that you don't need, or that is contrary or contradistinction to what it is that you intend to create for yourself, you just push trash. And you can actually watch it go into the trash bin. It's amazing. Whoop, makes a little sound. Whoop, goes right into trash. I love that. Then there's a button at the top that says delete, and it never comes back. Every negative thing that anybody ever tells you that you don't want to hear, that conflicts with what you are and what you intend to be, and you just push the trash button. I could say nothing more tonight and just leave, and that would be the best lecture you ever heard. Well, I guess I'll tell the story because... But I was telling them about, I had a little, about 3 years ago, I had a little thing on my chin. There's a little scar there, a little basal cell skin cancer thing, which is one cell. They just go down, they cut it out, and it's gone. So I was telling a friend of mine about that I had to go into the dermatologist, and they were going to do that. And she said, "Oh, my God, my girlfriend's husband had the very same thing, and they had to cut his penis off." I said, I just got a little thing on my chin. It's just a little red mark. It's like, no, he had that, and it was never even in the sun. So people are I mean, it's like, since people found out that I have this kind of leukemia, I get more messages about leukemia, especially the people that died from it. Oh, they send me their obituaries and tell me, you can never be too careful. And anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. But anyway, PBS. So you're the only ones that'll get to hear that story. They left it out. I keep thinking about that guy, though. I mean, there has to be some karma in there somewhere. I don't know. So Mary Oliver said, be astonished. That is, go through life just blown away every day by everything and everyone that you encounter. Just see the miraculousness in everything. And don't try to be what everybody else wants you to be. E. Cummings once said, to be nobody but yourself in a world which is doing its best night and day to make you just like everybody else means to fight the greatest battle there is to fight and never stop fighting. Just to be yourself. You don't have to be good. You don't have to be happy. You don't have to be right. You don't have to win. You just have to be yourself. And who you are is so incredibly miraculous. So be astonished. And finally, she said, tell other people. So simple. 3 simple little things. Pay attention, be astonished, and tell other people. And that's what I'm doing tonight. I'm astonished that you're here. I'm thrilled that you actually pay to come and hear me speak. I have 8 kids. They don't listen to a thing I say. That's not true. But I'm honored every time I do this. Every time they put my name on something and a couple of thousand people show up. Every time someone asks me for an autograph or wants to have a picture taken, I'm just astonished. I'm thrilled. And that's been a fascinating journey for me, away from ego and into one of just appreciation for every moment and for the miracles that I know are awaiting all of you. If you can move into this higher place that I'll be speaking about here this evening. See, the problem, I believe, for most of us is that we were raised to be ordinary. And ordinary is here at this level, about my waist. And there's nothing wrong with ordinary. Dan Millman is here this weekend, I believe. He's here speaking, I know, tomorrow or Sunday. I saw his name on there. He's an old friend of mine. Known him for a couple of decades. He wrote a book on the way of the peaceful warrior and had this character in there named Socrates. He was telling his student that he had to go out and sit on a rock and sit there and stay there until he could come up with something that was important, a thought that was important. And he'd sit, and then Socrates would say something to him, and he would say, no, that's not important. No, that's not it. He sat there for a day or two. I don't remember all the details. I read it 20 years ago, but just thought of it in this moment. And finally, Socrates came out to him after he had been sitting there a whole day, and Dan said to him, there are no ordinary moments. And he said, you're free to get up. You finally come up with something important or significant to say, that there are no ordinary moments. Unfortunately, that word ordinary is something... And when I use the word ordinary, I'm not using it as a pejorative at all. I'm not using it as a negative. But most of us, and we had parents who were raised that way, and they had parents that were raised that way, and it goes way back. And we are not raised to understand our divinity, who we are. We're raised to believe that we're to become just like everyone else. So your job is to learn to walk and learn to talk and learn to master your alphabet and your mathematics and go to school and get good grades and get out of school and get on the honor roll if you can, and go to college if you can, or if not, get a job and stay at that job and work and have a family and raise your children and raise them to be respectful and do all of the things that are fine. They really are. Fill out the forms, and we all fill out the forms, and pay your taxes, follow the rules, and have children, then have grandchildren, and then you die. And that's a successful life. And that's basically a big story in our world. I want to speak to you tonight about something that I call extraordinary awareness, higher consciousness. It's something that I believe is accessible, something I know is possible for any of us to put our attention on what we intend to manifest and create for ourselves in our life, and attract it, that the right people will show up, the right events will show up, the right timing will be there, and you have that capacity within you. Taking literally the words of Jesus, that even the least among you can do it all, just as I do. And I call this extraordinary awareness. Now, the thing about extraordinary awareness is that it encompasses ordinary. That if you're going to get here, you go through here. And I think at this point in my life, I'm living there in a very, very big way. Not better than anyone else. It's not about that at all. That I know that I'm not ordinary. I know who I am. And that means that I still fill out the forms. And I have 8 children, and I've made sure that they all are well taken care of and well provided for and given great guidance. And I'm proud of every single one of them. And I pay my taxes. Big time. I'm in that 1% that everybody's all pissed off about. Beyond that, beyond this ordinariness, is this distance between here and here. And in this distance between here and here, there is so much for you to become aware of and to practice and to live and to enjoy and to make a huge difference on this planet. And I think we as a people are going to have to do it, and that's why a gathering such as this is so important, because we've got to reverse it. I've just done a film called The Shift. It's a shift that I think really has to take place on a collective level. It's more than just individually changing our awareness and attracting into our lives what we would like to create for ourselves, becoming the people that we would like to be. It's making a real dynamic shift that we have to take responsibility for. I mean, today, a child being born in America has a shorter life expectancy than its parents. First time it's ever happened in our history. Ever. Imagine that. And the reason for that is not that we're going into reverse evolution. The reason for that is really basically 3 things. One, we've become a nation of addicts. Seriously. In the year 1970, one generation ago, there were 2 billion prescription tablets prescribed in America. 2 billion individual tablets prescribed in 1970. In 2007, a generation and a half or so later, that number is 113 billion. One generation. America is the only country other than New Zealand in the world that allows prescription drugs to be advertised on television. And our children and our teenagers and our young adults and you are being exposed every day to a literal conspiracy to get people addicted to the idea that they need to take a drug in order to get through their life, for whatever it might be. The fact is, I was with Christiane Northrup in Pasadena last weekend, and she was getting ready to go on. I don't know if you've ever heard Christiane. I've heard her on this stage. She's one of my favorite speakers, one of my favorite people in the world. And she was so excited about this thing that she just discovered, because she's always involved in some kind of crazy research. And she said, Wayne, you're not going to believe this. We've got the actual results with double-blind studies that people who grow their own vegetables and fruits in their own year and tend to these fruits and tend to these vegetables and tend to the food that they are going to eat, that the plants themselves are able to produce whatever is missing in the person who is nurturing them in their food. So that if you have an immune system disorder, if you have a vitamin B12 shortage, or if you have some kind of chemical need that you have in your body, one of the things that the plants know, our symbiotic relationship to these things, these plants, is that if you show them love and care for them and all of that, that they will grow whatever it is that you need when you eat them. Isn't that great? Does that astound you? I mean, that just blows me away. But we're living in a culture right now that has just submitted to the FDA and to Congress and to the lobbyists in the pharmaceutical industry are trying to get shyness, and grief, and considered them to be social anxiety disorders, which we can now give a prescription to from children from the age of 7 on. We can give them these drugs, put them on for life. It's true. I'm telling you, it's happening. You see even ads for things very similar to that on television all the time. By the time they list all of the side effects, I always wonder, how would anybody ever would go to their doctor and say, give me some of that stuff. I know I might get a bleeding ulcer, and I know I might have urinary. I may have an erection for 4 hours, and I may have, there's 1,000 things that might possibly happen to you if you take them. But our airwaves, of course, are filled, aren't they? They're filled with ads to train young people. We're exposed on a daily basis every time they have the television set on. Even on the children's channels, there are commercials to get you to believe that you need some kind of a pill to take care of virtually anything that might be going on in your life, and becoming aware of that. So that's one thing as a nation of addicts. I mean, in July, the last month that there are statistics for, 32 soldiers in the United States Army committed suicide. 32 soldiers in 1 month. And this is fairly normal. They're on antipsychotic drugs. They're on antidepressant drugs. My oldest daughter's best friend Kim, her husband had insomnia, went to a general practitioner and was told that, and there was nothing else wrong with this guy. They had a great marriage. Everything was going well in there. They were doing well financially, preparing to have a baby, all of these things, and he just couldn't sleep. He was put on Zoloft, an antidepressant, and he said 3 weeks later to his wife, Kim, who's a very close friend of mine, he said, I feel like my head doesn't belong. I feel like my head has to be removed from my body or something. He said, I just don't feel like I'm connected right. Nothing seems right. He said, I don't think I should be taking this. And she said, well, call the doctor. And they called the doctor, and he said, well, it takes about 6 weeks for this thing to really kick in for you. So take it for 3 more weeks. And if you're still having that, we'll try a different antidepressant. And she came home from Washington where she was working and came home. And Woody, her husband, had hanged himself. And this, you say, and this is a very common story. It's happening day in and day out. Not by the hundreds, but by the thousands and tens of thousands in America today. My 26-year-old daughter's best friend's fiance, 31 years old. Overdose, died of something having to do with Adderall and Xanax combination, and they found him dead, 31 years old. My daughter Summer is 28 years old. 4 people from her grade school, 8th grade, have already died of overdoses of drugs. 4 in one. There were only 28 kids in that class. 4 of them are dead. It's every day, folks. This is just, it's going to get better tonight, honestly. I'm not, it's not a... But what I think that we need to do is really become aware of why is the pharmaceutical industry in America so indifferent to what is happening. I mean, I just saw a study in the paper in the Maui News the day before yesterday, before I got here, that the number of deaths from OxyContin and oxycodone have tripled in just the last year and a half. The number of deaths of overdoses of these drugs. This is a Schedule III drug, which your dentist can give you if you have a tooth pulled, which they're trying to get it to a Schedule II, which would be equivalent to morphine, because that's how strong these pain pills that kids in junior high school and high school are selling for $20 a pop so that they can get high. All across the country. The pharmaceutical industry is in your pockets, is in your lives. And they have more lobbyists in Washington than there are congressmen. And this is all done in the name of greed, and it's just one of the things that's taking our young people down a road that we need to really take a hard look at. And you need to take a hard look at it, too, even in your own life. Because anytime you are taking more than 4 prescription drugs of any kind, 4 prescriptions, you have a 5th drug going into your body that you don't even know about, which is the combination of the 4, creating a 5th or a 6th or maybe even a 7th. I was growing up, getting a prescription was like an event. Maybe once every 3 years you would go and get something, but it would be just like a strong aspirin or something. And now you go into medicine cabinets of America, and most adults have 3, 4, 5 prescription drugs, and some are taking 12, 13, and 14. Just something to think about. That's one of the reasons that young people born today have a shorter life expectancy. Another is the amount of what's in the food. 31% of our young people are obese in America. 31%. That's almost 1 out of every 3 children are what we call chronically obese. And there's really no reason for that at all, other than what we are putting in our foods, which again is greed. It's money. It's GMOs, genetically modified organisms. We're changing the composition of food. It used to be when you wanted to have corn, you plant it in the ground. The next year, you'd take the seeds from that corn, put it in the ground, and it would grow. But that's not the way it is anymore. Now they are genetically modified so that the next generation of food, whether it's corn, whether it's squash, whether it's tomatoes, whatever it might be, has been engineered so that it does not produce a second generation. You have to go back to Monsanto or one of the big corporations and buy the seeds again. I wonder why they've done that. Check for your GMOs. Now we're trying to get labels. By the way, Kim's husband's name was Woody, and she has a website, and I encourage you to take a look at it. It's called woodymatters.com. Just look it up. She has devoted her life now to getting this pharmaceutical industry out of our pocketbooks and out of our lives. Not completely. I mean, obviously, some of the wonder drugs and so on have helped a lot of people with antipsychotics and so on, but they're being administered in a profit-making way that's horrific. And we need to do something about it. And you would think that, like I go down to visit, my daughter goes to college in Alabama, and I go down to visit her, and this is one of the poorest states in the United States as far as income and so on, and yet you see grossly obese people everywhere you go. Go to rent a car, these monstrous, huge people, 300-400-pound people. You go to the grocery store, you go to wherever you go, you just see an enormous number of these. And you would think that people who make the least amount of money would be thin. Wouldn't you? But it's not. It's not because of how much they eat. It's because of what's put into what they eat that gets them addicted to things that are just horrible for us. The average amount of sugar consumed in the United States in the year 1900 was about 20 grams a day of sugar. Today, that number is approaching 400 grams a day of sugar. There are 42 grams of sugar. You know what a gram, if you've been through the 80s like I was, you know what a gram of sugar looks like. Imagine 42 of those bags lined up and then all mixed up and put into one Coca-Cola. 42 grams of sugar. And diet and soda and this kind of stuff. And well, I could go on and on with that. I mean, it's a horror story. Bill Maher had on his show not too long ago a picture of a guy who people used to pay 5 cents in 1917 during World War I. They would pay 5 cents to come in and see the fat man. 5 cents. And they showed a picture of him. Probably 20% of the men in this room could have got a nickel in 1917. It's true. I'm looking around. It's true. All you have to do is travel like I do and get on airplanes and so on and go by Disney World and places like that, and you see what America's starting to look like. These enormous, gigantic people. And there's so many of them. And they are eating foods that have been contaminated by a food industry that doesn't have our best health. The third reason why our young babies born today are not living as long as their parents is the violence, just simply the amount of violence. Chicago Public Schools, 2007, 2008, 242 children shot to death in one school system. What's going on? The Chicago Tribune they decided to do a full-page story on each child that was murdered in the top, and they thought they would do like 20 or 30. They did 242, I think it was the total number. And every one is a tragedy. Last week, or 2 weeks ago, in Carson City, Nevada, a guy walked in with an AK-47 and blew away 8 people sitting at a restaurant. I want the people who voted in Washington to end the ban on automatic weapons to stand up. I want them to stand up and say, we take responsibility for mental patients being able to go buy automatic weapons. And why do we need, I don't care where you're from, why do we need automatic weapons for sale at Walmart? Why do we need that? Why do we have to have something where you squeeze one little squeeze and 50 bullets come out? Bambi doesn't need 50 bullets to kill him. And we take it all for granted. In fact, those stories don't even make the front page anymore. Have you noticed? It's going on day in and day out. Kids losing their lives to violence and bullying and so on because we feed them a steady diet of entertainment is watching people die instead of watching people soar. You depressed enough now? We'll pick it up. But I think even looking at something like Christianity where, Jesus, his comment was, I am the resurrection. He said, I am the resurrection. What does the resurrection mean? It means I am that which has transcended to this earthly plane. I am love. That's what God is, according to Jesus, God is love. He that dwelleth in love dwelleth in me. But most of our attention in Christianity around the world is on I am the crucifixion. Jesus never said I am the crucifixion, that which is suffering, that was what is wrong in the world. I am this divine being that all of you are. Anyway, so if we want to get to extraordinary consciousness, we have to do something different. One of the things I did on the PBS special, we created a street, and I started out with this. It was written by Portia Nelson. You may have heard this, but I love it, so I'm going to share it with you again. I've said it before. We were all at a conference many years ago. I got to know Portia quite well. She passed away about 10 years ago. And we were given these cards, these 5x7 cards, and told that we should write down the 5 chapters of our life. But this is all you get. So don't use big print. And you can't go on the other side. So you write the 5 chapters of your life up until right now. And everybody wrote out something, and, chapter 1 of my life, chapter 2. But Portia was a poet, and this is what she wrote. Chapter 1 of my life. I walk down the street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I fall in. I am lost. I am helpless. It isn't my fault, and it takes forever to find a way out. Chapter 2 of my life. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I pretend I don't see it. I fall in again. I can't believe I'm in the same place. It isn't my fault, and it still takes a long time to get out. Chapter 3 of my life. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole there in the sidewalk. I see it there. I still fall in. It's a habit. My eyes are open. I know where I am. It's my own fault. And I get out immediately. Chapter 4 of my life. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I walk around it at last. Chapter 5 of my life. I walk down another street. Isn't that good? I love that. That became the theme for the PBS show. So when you see it, you'll see my beret, which is I picked up in Lourdes. We took 162 people to 3 of the divine spiritual places on the planet where absolute miracles have taken place and took place on this trip. We went first to Assisi, where St. Francis, of course, performed his miracles in the 13th century, and then to Lourdes, where St. Bernadette had the 18 visitations of the Blessed Mother, and then to Medjugorje in Bosnia-Herzegovina, where the 6 children saw this same vision, and it was miraculous. But in walking down the streets of Lourdes, which is an amazing place, it's the second most visited place in France after Paris, and just a little village back in the 1858 when Bernadette had these visions, and they were selling these hats. And then my daughter Sky just went to Paris last week, just like I did when I was your age, honey. I used to go to Paris on the weekends, and all the time. I would bag groceries all week and then go off to Paris on the weekend. And anyway, she brought me back a couple more of them. You like getting a little for me when I'm up here, isn't that great? So the whole theme of this show, what we did is we filmed that entire process, and it was an amazing event, and I want to share a little bit about it with you because it really relates to what I'm speaking about here tonight with extraordinary consciousness, is that like this little man who lived in the 13th century, his name was Francesco Bernardone, who became known even a few days after his death in 1225 or 1226, I think it was, as St. Francis of Assisi, the man for whom the city of San Francisco was named. This beautiful little man. I was raised in foster homes and orphanages until I was 10 or 11. So I never had any Catholic training or Protestant training or Jewish training or anything like that. I just, wherever I would be living, that's what I was. Sort of the way it happened to you. It was the Baptists that were the most interesting because they had this big tub of water up there on the stage. They have a stage up here, and they'd have this thing of water, and they'd take people up there and dunk them down and hold them underwater. And I'd sit there scared shitless, in the back of the room. Sort of had a philosophy: if you hold someone underwater long enough, you come around to their point of view. Hallelujah, hallelujah. I got it. I'm there. At any rate, so all of the spiritual things that have come into my life have been just very fascinating to me. It's what I was saying earlier. When these things start happening to you in your life, it's like if you can, in the present moment, begin to connect the dots and begin to see, like this book that I'm reading about time, it's so fascinating to me because I just have a real strong sense. I remember when Arthur Miller was being asked the question, the great American playwright, and he was 91 years old in New York, and the Times asked him, "Are you working on another play?" The guy's 91. And they're asking him, "Are you working on another play?" And he said, I don't know. But he said, I probably am. I love that. I probably am, because he just had an awareness that there's something bigger moving the pieces around and that he's not in charge of it. And I've always, not always, but I've come to know that if you've got Dharma and you've got things that you came here to do and you signed up for it and it's like in your heart and you have that passion for it and you're ignoring it, or you've chosen ordinary and stayed with ordinary and said, this is good enough. But the thing in your heart that just keeps saying there's more to it, that's what we tried to show in the film, in The Shift. But it's like that becomes that passion that you feel towards moving towards this calling that you have is really God. That's really God speaking to you. And most of us just don't listen. We just think, well, I can't do it. I'm too old. I'm too young. I'm, too poor. I don't live in the right city. We got the wrong economy. We got the wrong president. We've got the wrong whatever it is. We've got some kind of excuse that we come up with as a reason why we can't fulfill this internal calling that is really just, the word enthusiasm breaks down to entheos in Greek, entheos, God, within, the God within. So when you have enthusiasm for anything, that's God calling you towards it. And that's when I said earlier that when this whole idea that when the student is ready, the teachers will appear. The teachers are always there. They show up in so many ways, and we just ignore it. We just, this book, this isn't really something. I've been blown away all day by what I've been reading all day and taking notes on it and thinking, I guess I'm working on another book. I just finished one. It's not even out yet. And it's such an exciting kind of thing. I mean, it just makes my heart leap with excitement that I'm now paying attention. I'm paying much closer attention. Back 30 years ago, at a lecture that I was giving someplace in America, someone handed me a prayer, all framed very beautifully. It was the prayer of St. Francis. And I just looked at it, and I didn't even know much about St. Francis. I didn't even know that San Francisco was named after him. I never even thought of that. It's just, and then I hung it up in our house. We had built a house, and I have 8 children, 6 daughters and 2 sons. And so we had one every day, it seemed like. I mean, were we ever not having kids? But we had 5 and 8 years. And my wife used to say, in one decade, I went from a 36C to a 32 long. At least she had a sense of humor. She said, don't you remember when Sky came along, I would nurse her up here, and then when summer came, and then I would sit down, I had a pillow. And finally, when Sage was born in 1989, she said, I would just say, look, you want a drink, help yourself. I'm very busy. I've got a lot to do here, So at least she could laugh about it. And so we built this home, and there were 5 bedrooms upstairs, and so I would walk back and forth between these bedrooms, saying goodnight to the kids, saying good morning to the kids, getting them up, all of the things that my kids do, and they've been my greatest teachers. They really have, because if I raise my voice, say anything that's inconsistent with what I teach and talk about, it's the foot here, the one on the hip, and it's like... I wonder what all those people would think of Mr. Positive if they could see him here this morning. Say, okay, don't write Daddy Dearest. I don't want that book written. My one daughter said, would you buy a book from someone who yells at his 10-year-old daughter? I don't understand those people. I think the best line I ever got from my kids, I've always loved to use it, is my daughter Summer at 13 said to my daughter Serena at 11, at breakfast one morning, she just looked at her and said, well, if you didn't have any feet, would you wear shoes? You never know what's going to come when you got kids around like that, especially that many. Serena, who can hardly stand anybody at that time of the morning, looked at her and said, that's the most ridiculous thing you've ever said to me. Don't even talk to me. It's 6 o'clock in the morning. Why are you even talking? What do you mean if I didn't have any feet, would I wear shoes? That's so stupid. Of course not. Summer looked at her and said, look, don't get mad at me. I'm just wondering why you're wearing that bra. That's all. I had to write that down. I said, I follow them around. I still do it. They're in their 20s and 30s and 40s now. And I say something stupid. Come on, I need some material. Anyway, I looked at this prayer of St. Francis for years and years, 10, 15, 20 years go by, and I had no idea the significance of the person handing me, who in her home had gone and had this thing framed and put beautiful flowers around it, and it was really elegant and beautiful and proud to hang in the walls. I didn't even know what the prayer was or anything, but I would go by it, and every once in a while I would stop and just look at it and read it, and it was so powerful because it's really not a prayer. It's a technology. Where there is hatred, it's like, I've often thought of myself as an alchemist, especially after reading The Alchemist. If you haven't read The Alchemist, read The Alchemist, Coelho's book. It's about omens, which I'm speaking about here tonight. It's about things that show up that are there for you. And alchemy is really the science of transferring one thing into another, converting something. Lead into gold, basically, is what the alchemy is. But the prayer of St. Francis is really about, it's not about substituting one thing for another. He doesn't ask for that. Let me take out some hatred and bring in some love. He says, make me an instrument of thy peace. Where there is hatred, let me be love. Let me bring love. Where there is sadness, joy. Where there is darkness, light. In other words, let me convert hatred into love. Let me be that kind of a person. An alchemist, someone who can make those kinds of shifts. I practice it. My kids will tell you that. I practice it all the time in my life. I mean, if I see hatred, if I see anger, if I see it in a grocery store, I move in closer and stand close to someone who's yelling at one of their children or something, or berating or loud or whatever. And just, to me, my kids will say, Dad, Dad, Dad. I said, look, I'm not going in and slapping somebody around to create more violence. I'm just going to stand closer because I really believe that I can change that, shift that hatred into love. And you can do it, especially when your energy reaches a certain level. When you start moving, your intuition starts getting sharper, your psychic abilities, if you will, your ability to heal. All of these things begin to elevate as you move out of ordinary. You're still going to fill out the forms. I want you to know, I still fill out the forms. I went to a yoga class this morning. It was a new yoga class. I've never been there. And they had a form with like 30 questions on there. Questions and questions. I said, I just want to do a yoga class here this morning. But you have to fill out all of these things. So I fill out the forms. What am I going to say? No, I am living at extraordinary levels of consciousness. I don't do forms. She does the forms for me. Please do the form. I fill out the forms. And when the IRS calls, I send them my money. I send them half almost of everything I get. I just do it. So it's not about putting down ordinary. It's about going beyond it. It's about converting ordinary into extraordinary, which is what I'm here to do tonight. And what I do all the time, everywhere, in every place that you find me. You will not find me living at ordinary levels any longer. When I sit down on a plane, I reach out to see if there's somebody who might need some help. If it's a little person who has to reach up and put their bag up, to me that's an opportunity, and I glory in it, in just reaching out and serving somebody else. No, it's just the truth. It's just an opportunity to live at God consciousness, at higher levels of awareness. So the prayer of St. Francis, I would look at it, I would read it, and then, 7 or 8 years later, now 7 or 8 years, but when there's no time, when there's no time, you realize that everything is happening at once. And from this perspective, those 7 or 8 years were just a moment. They were just an instant. And I came to decide that I wanted to write a book called There's a Spiritual Solution to Every Problem. And I got called to Assisi. I don't know why I got called to Assisi. My wife and I went there together. We sat in the Portiuncula in Assisi where St. Francesco had done his meditating and his healing work and so on and during his lifetime in the 13th century. My wife and I had, both of us, tears rolling down our faces, sitting in this little wooden, old, 800-year-old little chapel surrounded by all these gold marble places and all of that, but here we were in this place. And I went out and walked in the fields where Francesco walked and tried to get the birds to line up the way he did. It was miraculous. And I came back, and meditation knew that the whole organization for that book, Spiritual Solution to Every Problem, was just so clarified that I was to write it, and it was based on each line of the prayer of St. Francis. Each chapter became one of those. Each line became a chapter. I went back again to Assisi. I was called back there again in 2001, and if you see the shift, you'll see an amazing healing took place. It's just sort of an introduction to me that there is more to this whole prosperity consciousness, and prosperity when it comes, I'm speaking prosperity not financial, I'm speaking medically, physically, who we are. The health that we have and the bodies that we live in are susceptible to and amenable to divine law. Joel Goldsmith said that in the presence of the God realized, the laws of the physical universe do not apply. Gravity doesn't apply. The rules that you think cause and effect don't exist. Being able to have instantaneous healings from someone who's been told that they're going to die, it's all capable and possible. I went to Assisi at that time. I wore a brace every day on my knee. I had been a marathon runner, an ultra-marathon runner, a triathlete. I ran every day 8 miles a day for almost 30 years, 29 years. Missed one day in 29 years. And played a lot of tennis and all of that. And this right knee was just bone on bone. And orthopedic surgeons had told me that I'd have to have it replaced within the next 2 years. Otherwise, I'd be in a wheelchair. And I went to Assisi. Not for that reason. In fact, I didn't even wear my brace the day that we took a group of people up to in San Damiano, the place where St. Clair, from the Poor Clares, had lived. And we were walking up this winding staircase, and a guy named John Grable was behind me. And he was about a 200-pound man, and he had muscular dystrophy, and he had braces on his legs. And as the staircase narrowed, he couldn't get it, because this is how he would go up the steps, like this, and then he would go like this. And as it narrowed, he couldn't go up and he couldn't go down, and he just said to me, "What am I going to do?" He was right in back of me. I said, "Just put your arms around my neck, and I'll carry you up to the top." But I forgot I didn't have my brace on, and I got up about 4 or 5 steps, and all of a sudden I felt my leg just going, and I could see the headlines in the Assisi Daily News. Spiritual teacher arrives 40 dead at the bottom of the stairs. And as I was going down with John on my back, because there was just no cartilage at all in this knee, I saw Francesco. This is weird. I really did. And he was right there in front of me. He was a little man with a brown robe, and he went like this with both of his hands. Didn't say a word, and it was just a flash. Just an instantaneous flash, as if to say, "Stand." And I stood up, and I started walking up the steps with John on my back, and I went a little further, and then I started running with John on my back, and then I started raising my leg up, and I hadn't had that feeling in years and years because of the whatever it was that was in that knee, arthritis. My wife was waiting at the top of the stairs. She said, "What in the world is going on? Everybody else is out of breath. You're running with John on your back." And I said, "I just saw Francesco." And I went over and I put my hands together and I gave thanks because I knew a miracle had just taken place. So that was my second experience with St. Francis. Now, and there were so many others. But as I look back and I begin to see what a role he played in my life and what he was teaching, that this last time that I went, I was giving a talk in this church where St. Francis had been. It was built in the 10th century. And at the end of the talk, something happened to me. I was out of control, sobbing. And the entire room stood up and held their hands out. And it wasn't like I was talking about St. Francis any longer. And this is really one of the key things that I'm saying to you here tonight. That when you reach a level, you'll hear about awareness a lot, but when you reach a level of higher awareness, till you get to a place within yourself when you are living your passion, and it is so overwhelming that what you are putting your attention on, you become, and it becomes you. And Francesco entered my body, and I felt him, and I couldn't move. And I just stood there, the tears just flowing down my face. And people took pictures, and there's a big picture of Jesus in the back. So many of the cameras show these huge, I'm putting them in the book, these huge orbs, which are like these circular kind of things that show up in photographs that we just don't quite know what they are. There's a whole book written about it called Orbs. And they were right there, right at the base of where Jesus was in that picture, and right above my head. And Francesco and I became one in that moment as we were talking about it. And this is a consciousness that I really want to address. It's the same consciousness that all of you have every single night in your dream. So that when you go to sleep and you dream, anytime you want to be something or someone, it doesn't matter how old they are, it doesn't matter if it's your grandmother or your mom who has been gone for 2 years, who I see a lot. It doesn't make any difference if you want to be 4 years old. It doesn't make any difference if you want to have a new Mercedes in your driveway. You don't have to go to all the trouble you have to do in this level of consciousness. You got to get up, you got to get dressed, you got to go drive down to the dealership, you got to sit in the car, you got to write a check, all of the things that you got to do to have that Mercedes in your driveway. All you have to do is put your attention on it. And for 1/3 of your life, you have the capacity to do that. Have you ever thought of that? That all you have to do is put your attention on something when you're in that state. And that is a state in which your subconscious mind is aligned with your conscious mind, and you become one with it. And what I want to say to you is that when you start living your passion and it really becomes where you are coming from within, and you place your attention and live there from passion without any expectation of anything in return, this is God consciousness. Because God doesn't say to us, "I'll give you this if you give me that." Religion tells us that. God doesn't say that. You don't have to pay. You just have to be. And as you become that, and as you live from that place, that wherever you place your attention, it shows up. It's like Carl Jung had a wonderful quote. He said, "From the beginning, I had a sense of destiny as though my life was assigned to me by fate and had to be fulfilled. This gave me an inner security, and though I could never prove it to myself, it proved itself to me. I did not have this certainty. It had me. I've often been called the father of motivation over the years. Somehow that tag got put on me. But I don't think of myself as a motivator. Motivation is when you get a hold of an idea, a motivated person, and you take it to its obvious conclusion, and you don't let anything interfere with it. You're going to make this happen no matter what, right? That's a motivated person. Inspiration is the reverse of that. Inspiration is when an idea gets a hold of you. Your ego gets out of the picture, and you allow it to take you where you were intended to go from that field of intention from which all things come and to which all things return. T.S. Eliot put it this way: we shall not cease from exploration, and at the end of all of our exploring will be to return to the place from which we originated and to know it for the first time. I believe the poet was speaking about death. I'm not. I'm speaking about coming to know the place from which we originated, the place to which we will all return, and to know it without having to discard your body, which you ultimately will do. Because moving into this level of extraordinary consciousness involves an internal knowing that I can get to a place of awareness wherever I put my attention with enthusiasm with God, that I will become it and it will become me, because there's no separation. The ego is only about separation. That's a stupendously phenomenal place to get to. And I remember being in Assisi, now my third visit to Assisi. I wrote an entire book there. I had my leg healed there. My wife and I had we still speak about that moment as one of the signature moments in our lives, being there with us in Assisi. That prayer hanging up. And I look back, there's a song that Sky used to sing called From a Distance, the Bette Midler song, From a Distance. When you can get back to a place where from a distance you can look at the events of your life and the things that have taken place, and you can see how this had to happen in order for this had to happen, in order for this had to happen. The person that you're married to, the children that you have, the night that they were conceived, how it could have been a different night and it would have been a different child, and which we often hope for, but we can't. It's like all of it. And not only how you got here, but how your parents got here. And if that would have been on a different night, or your grandparents, or 40 centuries back. I mean, there's no accidents. This is it's like, be astonished. Pay attention. This whole place is one great big miracle. I mean, and it's truly, it's like, so now I look back and I think, Francesco, St. Francis. And I got a letter from a woman who heard me speaking in a place called Vernon, British Columbia, a few months back. And she wrote me this beautiful letter. I put it in the introduction to the book. She tells the story of when I was giving a talk up there on stage, and how, as I started talking about St. Francis, that she could see me transform into St. Francis. And when I spoke about Lao Tzu and the Tao and all of that I've written so much about and lived back 6 years ago when I was writing the Tao Te Ching. Well, not writing the Tao Te Ching, but writing my essays on Change Your Thoughts, Change Your Life. It's a book that you should carry with you. Some call it the wisest book ever written. I spent an entire year on each of the 81 verses. I recommend you carry that thing with you. Put it in your purse, put it in your glove compartment, carry the Tao with you. Someone sent me a book, Jesus and Lao Tzu. And on one side of the page was all the teachings of Jesus, and on the other side was all the teachings of Lao Tzu, and they were identical, almost word for word. And Lao Tzu lived 500 years before Jesus. I'm not saying Jesus was plagiarizing, don't get me wrong. I'm just saying that there are eternal truths. There are eternal truths. And Lao Tzu wrote about them in the year 500 BC and then walked away from the warring states in China. I live the Tao. I have a painting of Lao Tzu in my living room, and every single one of the chapters that I wrote for the Tao, Lao Tzu dictated them through me. I just sat there and just allowed it to come. And it works, I'm telling you. Same with this book I've just written. It was so sweet. Every day, my kids will tell you, they were there all summer long with me and on Maui. And every day, about 1 o'clock, I'd take off and be gone for 5 hours. And I'd just be over there just letting it come, just paying attention and being astonished and realizing that none of this is about me. So I can look back on all of that. So moving into extraordinary consciousness is really walking down another street. This book that I told you I've been reading about changing the future through time had a quote by René Descartes in it. And this is what it said. This was the display quote for the book. Like, this is what this thing is about. In order to reach the truth, it is necessary at some point in one's life. Now, really hear this. René Descartes was a philosopher, 18th century. I mean, this goes back, all right? In order to reach the truth, it is necessary at some point in one's life to rid oneself of all the opinions one has received and to rebuild one's entire system of knowledge from the very foundation. You have to be willing to just let it all go. So that if you want to change, if you want to do that, if that appeals to you, it really means changing your concept of yourself. And you have to ask yourself the question, what is my concept of myself? Your concept of yourself is everything that you believe to be true about you and about what's possible for you and about what's not possible for you. All of this stuff that you have had handed to you by your culture, by your parents, by their parents, by your school system, by your religious training, by your own experiences. All of this stuff that you have come to believe is absolutely a true thing, you have to be willing to shed it all and start with a whole new foundation which says, with God, all things are possible. And that leaves nothing out. What does all things are possible leave out? Absolutely nothing. So that if all things are possible, you have to start listening to what I call your higher self. Your higher self, I studied for the last year a book of teachings. There's about 12 volumes of them. It's called Know Thyself. And this is what it looks like. It's out of print. It's from a teacher in Bulgaria whose name is Omram Mikhail Ivanov. And he teaches initiatic sciences, what they call the white brotherhood, which is not white skin, all right? It's white light, all right? And one of the things it says in here, because this whole thing, all this initiatic science stuff, it's all about the higher self. And the higher self is the self that goes beyond the ego. The ego is just the part of you that has come to believe that who you are is what you were taught in what is ordinary consciousness. Who I am is what I have, what I accumulate, what I own, what I accomplish, what other people think of me. Who I am is separate from everyone else and separate from God. And it's all an illusion. You are none of those things. You have to ask yourself the question, if you ask yourself the question, who am I, and you believe that you're your body, then you've been in so many bodies since you were born. I mean, you were in a body this big. You were in a toddler body. You were in a 10-year-old body. You were in a 20-year-old body. You were in one of those bodies that did what my kids did all the time, standing up. You were in all of those different bodies. And every time when you ask yourself the question, is this who I am? Am I this body? You say, yeah, I was in a 20-year-old body. I just saw a picture of it. They put it on the TV screen when I was doing the PBS show. And I looked at it and I said, I really, when I was in that, thought that was real. Well, that was 51 years ago. Where the hell is it? Where is that body that I thought was so real? It's gone. I can't be that body. Muktananda was asked the question, what is real? He said, that is real, which never changes. So the part of you that is changing isn't real. You're in a body. It's 20 years old. It has all kinds of things that it does. And then you're in a body 30 years old, and you look back and try to find that 20-year-old body, and you find out it doesn't exist at all. Not one cell is left of that body. Not one cell. And the body that you're in now, that you believe is you, if it's changing, it's not real, according to Muktananda's definition. It's not real. How can it be real when tomorrow it'll be something else? Emily Dickinson put it poetically so beautifully. She would pick up a handful of dust and she would say, this quiet dust was gentlemen and ladies and lads and girls, was laughter and ability and sighing and frocks and curls. This passive place, a summer's nimble mansion, where bloom and bees fulfilled their oriental circuit, then ceased like these. Who you are is that which continues to occupy things that keep on changing. And who you are in this present was once, what you call the past, a future. And who you are here is a past that will become a future. But who you are is not this thing that you live in. And this is one of the awakenings that has come into my life. I mean, we all know this. I mean, it's pretty obvious that you're not the body that you're in, since it just keeps on changing. That who you are is infinite. And the higher self, this is how Ivanov describes it. He says, the Creator has planted within every creature a fragment of himself, a spark, a spirit of the same nature as himself. And thanks to this spirit, every creature can become a creator. And this means that instead of always wanting for their needs to be satisfied by some external source, human beings can work inwardly by means of their thoughts, their will, and their spirit to obtain the nourishing, healing elements they need. This is why the teaching I bring you is of the spirit of the Creator and not of matter. So this higher self is something that really intrigues me at this time in my life. And it's the second chapter in the book, Wishes Fulfilled, the higher self. And he calls it a spark. It's my intention to help people who read this, as it has been for me, to take this spark, this infinite spark of who you are, that continues to occupy this body that is always changing, so it's not real, and let it become a fragment, which is a little larger than a spark. And having this fragment become like maybe the size of a dime inside of you, and then the size of a quarter, and then the size of a golf ball, and then the size of a baseball, and then the size of a soccer ball, until this inner spark of divinity, of God, that is who you are, that is infinite, becomes the dominant force in your life. This spark, it's so significant, so important to recognize that it's really your identity. And I call this spark, as so many others do, the soul. And when Vivekananda, this great teacher, came over from India to teach here back in the early part of the 20th century, and he was asked the question that so many people ask, how? How do you get to this God-realized place where you can become a miracle worker, where you can heal, where you can perform miracles, where you can put your attention on what you would like to attract and have it show up? You all have the ability to do this. Jung called it synchronicity, where you have like a collaboration with fate.
Hi there. My name is Liz Dawn, and I am the co-creator of Celebrate Your Life events. And I hope you're loving this amazing workshop with the late and great Dr. Wayne Dyer. This was recorded live at one of our Celebrate Your Life conferences. And I'm so excited that we could share this very special workshop with all of the Evan Carmichael fans. And to learn more about us, just click the link below and visit celebrateyourlife.com.
You put your attention on something, you're thinking about something, you're not thinking about yourself, you're not thinking about what's in it for me, and the person you're thinking about calls you on the phone. Who has had that experience in this room? Look, it's a universal experience, and we still call it a coincidence because we don't understand the word coincidence. It comes from coincide, a mathematical term. Two angles, remember Geometry 101? Two angles that coincide are two angles that fit together perfectly. We've taken something that fits together perfectly and interpreted it to mean something that shows up accidentally, and it doesn't. Nothing shows up accidentally. Nothing. Vivekananda put it this way. He said, in the springtime, go out and observe the blossoms on the fruit trees. He said, the blossoms vanish of themselves as the fruit grows. Get that image. The blossoms vanish of themselves as the fruit grows. So too will the lower self vanish as the divine grows within you. You just have to become your highest self. And your highest self is where we're going to take a journey now that some of you are going to find difficult to accept. Some of you will laugh at. Some of you will probably be insulted by it, perhaps. But your highest self is the third chapter of this book before I move into the principles for manifesting and attracting into your life from that place of inner God realization. The Secret didn't quite have it. They asked me to be a part of it, and I didn't. Because I do not believe that we attract into our life what we want. I believe we attract into our life who we are, what we are. And when we become God-realized people, creation becomes our way of being. We are omniscient. That spark is omniscient. That spark is God. Your highest self is that you are God. Now, the soul, this part of you that has no boundaries, has no beginnings, has no ends, you can't find it. I mean, I remember talking to a neurosurgeon who's a friend of mine on Maui, and he was saying, you know, you talk about all of this stuff, but I'm a scientist. He said, I've poked inside a lot of brains, and he said, I've never seen a soul anyplace. I said, well, while you're in there poking around in those brains, have you ever seen a thought? No, I haven't. I said, do you think they exist? You think because you can't poke one that it doesn't exist? That this soul of yours, now listen to this. I know you're tired. I know you've been working all day, but that's nothing. We're going great places now in the next hour or so. Your soul, this invisible part of you that keeps occupying these bodies, these new bodies all the time. And you're watching, you know, in the Tao, Lao Tzu said it so beautifully. He said, the Tao does nothing. God, the Tao, it's another word for God. The Tao does nothing, and it leaves nothing undone. He said, none of you are doing anything. You're just being done. You must realize that about your body. I mean, you got to look in the mirror and look at it and know that something's doing it. I mean, they are sagging, right? And they are turning gray, and they are doing, it's like, this isn't you. And something in there is beating your heart and digesting your food and making all of these weird things inside of us, these rivers of fluids and all. There's something doing all of this. My son has taken this up, by the way, as his motto. I say, Sans, please, come on, get going. Let's do something. Let's get moving. I do nothing, and I leave nothing undone. It's his favorite motto. He loves to say it. So if you get this about your soul, if you get nothing else tonight, get this about the soul. I wrote something for you today. I feel this so strongly because your soul is not finite, is it? If your soul isn't finite, what is it? Infinite. Right? Beyond finite. And what does infinite mean? It means never ending, doesn't it? It means no beginnings. It means no ends. There is a part of you that is birthless, deathless, changeless. You are that. This is like, it's that quiet dust. The great Irish poet William Butler Yeats said, an aged man is but a paltry thing, a tattered coat upon a stick, unless soul claps its hands and sings, and louder sings, for every tatter in its mortal dress. We're just tattered coats on a stick, unless we have a soul. And when our soul claps its hands and sings, and louder sings, it transcends these tatters. And honestly, folks, you gotta get this. This is who you are. The rest of this is like, you just got to become the observer to it. This isn't just New Age, airy-fairy stuff now I'm talking about up here. This is so real that you can heal yourself of leukemia. Oh, yeah. And you can attract the right people into your life. If you don't know how to do it, that will do it for you. And it does happen, and it has happened. You're listening to someone who's let it all go. And I'll tell you about that a little later, because it's too weird yet. But I had such an experience with John of God in Brazil, and I had surgery performed on me without anybody touching me. My life changed so dramatically. My children, one of them is here, she'll be up here in a few moments, will tell you about it. It has been an alarming shift. The surgery wasn't the healing of the leukemia and the regaining of my strength and the reversing the aging process. I'm telling you, I'm taking it down, all of that stuff. What it did was because I guess I must be a big-time messenger with big dharma, and I have a voice that people want to come and hear wherever I go. It doesn't matter what city, what place, what country, wherever. People listen for some reason. That I was infused after that experience with John of God with so much love for everything and everyone that I understand what Mary Oliver was saying when she said, pay attention. Everything just looks different now, including you, this room, the trees outside my room, the swim I do every day, the yoga I do, which I had to stop doing because it was too exhausting. And now I never want it to end. But the love, it was the love. The love was just so all-encompassing. And it's just... It's been such a fabulous journey. I mean, I've always felt like a kind, loving person, but nothing like this. I had my birthday a few days after that happened, and the only thing I wanted to do was go out and talk to homeless people. I was in San Francisco at the St. Francis Hotel filming a new film we're done on finding my father called My Greatest Teacher. I took this big wad of $50 bills that I went down and got, and every homeless person, every little old lady from Laos taking plastic bottles out of the trash to take and try to get a few dollars so that she could feed herself became like, I understood what Mother Teresa said. Every day I see Jesus Christ in all of his distressing disguises. These people with no teeth, the people who were so drunk that they could hardly walk, the people who were just so dirty. It was like talking to them. I spent the whole day, my 71st birthday, May the 10th. It was the greatest birthday I've ever had. And I gave away, I don't know, like $1,500 that day, and just... And I came back into my room and I sat, and I'm almost ready to do it now. I sat on my bed and I just sobbed with joy at how grateful I am and how fortunate I am, how lucky I am, and what this healing has done for me and how many others have been healed as a result of it as well. And that's all I've wanted to do is just give. No, I don't want any applause for that. It's like thinking like God thinks. I used that observation of Hafiz. You know, he said, even after all this time, the sun never says to the earth, you owe me. Just think what a love like that can do. It lights up the whole world. That kind of love, it lights up the whole world. And I think people like us, a collection like this number of people here in this room, can do that kind of thing when we multiply it and bring it together and it becomes exponential. Just a couple of thousand people that are in this room could do it. I'm telling you. David Hawkins said that It would take one being living at Christ consciousness to compensate for all of the people who calibrate below 200 on our planet. Just one being living at Christ consciousness could do that. But if you get your calibration up to 700, you can compensate for 150 to 200 million people who are operating at these lower levels of hatred and bitterness and fighting and all of that by becoming an alchemist. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Let me turn hatred into love. Like when you go into a dark room, how do you turn darkness into light? You don't say, okay, I'll be right back. I'm going to take this darkness out, we'll remove the darkness, then we'll bring in some light. Alchemy doesn't work that way. You just light a candle and you convert darkness to light. You convert it. And the thing I wrote for you about your soul is this. Really hear this. The ideal of your soul, and all of you have one because you have to, the logic is impeccable. You are not this body. If you think that you are, you also thought it of the bodies, all the bodies you've been in since you incarnated. And none of them are any place. Every cell is gone. So you are something that is birthless and deathless and changeless. That's who you are. The ideal of that, the soul, the thing that it asks for is neither knowledge or light or happiness. The ideal of your soul is space, immensity. The one thing it needs is to be free to expand and to reach out and to embrace the infinite. Why does your soul need to embrace the infinite? Because that's what it is. It is not finite. If it was finite, you would be able to see it, touch it, have a boundary for it. It would end someplace and begin someplace. Because it doesn't, anything that is infinite is always doing what? It's always expanding. The minute it stops expanding, it becomes finite. You have an end to it. So your soul wants to rejoin that which it is always connected to. It wants to grow. It wants to expand. Yes, the ideal of the soul is infinity. It is miserable when it is circumscribed and restricted. It is a fragment of the universal soul, which is infinite. Your soul is a fragment of God, the infinite soul. And all it wants to do is expand. Now, how does this fit in with ordinary? Ordinary has limits. It has rules. It has things that you can do and can't do. It has beginnings. It has ends. It has study things. It has forms to fill out. It has rules to obey. And the soul, every one of you who are parents know that nobody likes being told what to do, right? My mother is 95. I'm going to see her on Monday down in Orlando. She's 95. And when I would come to her house when she was 90, everybody would come in. She'd say, oh, hi, hi, everybody. Wayne, wipe your feet. I said, I'm 60 years old. Why are you telling me to wipe my feet? Because nobody wants to be told what, nobody wants to be circumscribed. Nobody wants to be fenced in. Anybody that tries, look, folks, when somebody tries to fence you in, when someone tries to tie a knot around you, when someone tries to make you become what they think that you should become, anytime that you're dealing with this in your life, you're dealing with the soul, your soul, who you are, not your body. Your body can follow the rules. It'll do what it's told. But who you are in here is saying, back off. Don't tell me what to do. Don't circumscribe me. Don't make me into something that you think that I should be. Don't put a fence around me. Don't put limits on me. Your soul doesn't know anything about limits. It's God. Because your highest self is God. You are not just a fragment of God. You are not just a piece of God. You are not just a soccer ball size of God. When you do what Vivekananda said and allow the divine to grow within you until it becomes who you are, you begin to recognize a great and fundamental truth. I read 2 major books for preparation for writing Wishes Fulfilled. One of them was called 3 Magic Words by a man named U.L. S. Anderson. And the other was a book by Neville, which I brought with me here tonight, called The Power of Awareness. And this is going on PBS. And PBS approved this. I can't wait. Well, I'm telling you, the death threats are going to be coming. But you can't kill me because I'm infinite, you know. It's like, that's why I can't have cancer. I can't have, how can that which has no form have something like cancer? It's not who I am. I don't need anything else to know other than who I am is immune to all of that. Now, I read 3 Magic Words, because I had my teacher in India actually recommend that I read this book. It's truly a life-changing book, and after PBS, I mean, it's going to be a bestseller, okay, which is great, because the guy died in 1986, I think. So there are 12 chapters in this, and it's all about higher consciousness. It's all about, there's meditations at the end of every chapter. Some of you will find it heavy. For me, it's it's like porn. I mean, it's just... I mean, there's so much of that. Not that I know anything about it. That little iPad has funny little features in it, though, but I won't go into that. So I read each of the chapters in here, and you never find out what the 3 magic words are. That's the title of the book. You get to the 12th chapter, and the 12th chapter is called The Veil Removed. And this is what U.S. Anderson says at the beginning of removing the veil. After we did all of these meditations, after we did all this, the studying, the consciousness, the exercises, I mean, I really studied this in depth. This is the ineffable secret, the ultimate illumination, the key to peace and power. Here they are, 3 magic words. You are God. If you will accept this towering truth and dare to stand atop this magnificent pinnacle, universal consciousness will be revealed to you from within. God is there. It is God who peers from behind your eyes, who is your own consciousness, who is your very self. You are not just a part of God. You are altogether God, and God is altogether you. Now, you were not brought up to believe this. Even though you had scriptures thrown at you and so on, there's a wonderful line in the New Testament. I read the entire New Testament before I wrote Wishes Fulfilled. Preparation for the flack I'm going to be receiving, which I look forward to because my answer is I'm just quoting your guy, okay? And Jesus is about to be stoned. And he says, why would you stone me? The book of John. And his tormentors say, because you are a man and you blaspheme. You claim to be God. And he says, is it not written in your laws that I have said you are gods? And there is St. Paul writing in his letters to the Philippians a little bit later on in the New Testament. And he says, have in you the same mind as Christ Jesus, who being in the form of God, did not consider it robbery to be equal with God. Were you raised to believe that you are God? Or were you raised to believe that God is something external to you, that God is this deity, this being that we have created in our own image, that plays favorites, knows how to heal, but withholds it from some and gives it to others, is full of rage and full of anger? Were we ever taught that we came from, we return to this divine consciousness? The other book that I was speaking about when I was speaking about the essence of this talk tonight is from a book called The Power of Awareness by Neville. And Neville was a man who died in 1972. He lectured all over the West Coast. Brilliant speaker. I gave a copy of this book to each one of my 8 children for Christmas a couple of years ago, and they all wrote back and said, nice gift, Dad, but we don't understand any of it. I said, well, then maybe it's my job to make it understandable, and that's what I've done with Wishes Fulfilled. But I've read this book 7 times, and the 7th time was on my way to the U.S. I live in Maui, to the mainland, about a year ago, and I didn't ever catch this before, and this is what the last chapter, it's called Reverence, says. It says, in all creation, in all eternity, in all the realms of your infinite being, the most wonderful fact is that which is stressed in the very first chapter of this book. You are God. You are the I am that I am. You are consciousness. You are the creator. This is the mystery. This is the great secret known by the seers, prophets, and mystics throughout the ages. This is the truth. The only truth that you can never know intellectually. I could lecture about this forever and you will not know it, because if you want to learn something intellectually, what you do is you get theories about it, you cogitate on it, you come up with a formula about it, you interview people who you think are experts about it, you read books about it, and ultimately come to a conclusion intellectually. To understand the rest of what I have to say to you tonight, spiritually, you must be willing to experience it. Now, I'm not suggesting that you go out into the world and anybody says anything to you, you say, excuse me, but I am God. I don't want to be talked to like that. When I say I am God, I am well, I am perfect health, you are really saying God's name the way Jesus referred to it. God is love. Perfect love. And he that dwelleth in perfect love dwelleth in me, and I in him, and I in the Father. We are perfect love. We came from it. Now, a little book came to me that I quoted about 20 times in Wishes Fulfilled. It's called the I Am Discourses. It was, I get so many books and so many requests to write forwards and introductions and things like this. And most of them I'm not even able to look at. It's just too many for one person. So I put them in a stack and kind of flip through them, and then I donate them to schools or churches or religious centers or prisons or whatever. But every once in a while, something comes with energy in it. And I was away from Maui, and I had stopped doing yoga because when I was diagnosed with leukemia, I believed what the oncologist had said to me, which is that I can't do, this is going to be too exhausting, you're going to, somehow that got imprinted in here, and I forgot who I am. And for 11 months, I stayed away from yoga, and I slowed down, and I was getting sicker. and tired, losing my energy, and buying into something that wasn't appropriate for me to buy into. Just wasn't ready for that. And it was inconsistent with all that I had been teaching and all that I knew. And even when I got the diagnosis, I didn't even believe it because I don't do cancer. I help other people with it, but I don't do that. Yoga instructor at the studio in Lahaina on Maui called me up frantically 2 or 3 times. She said, a lady dropped this off, and she said it's wrapped up in gold, and she said, you have to read this. I said, well, I get that a lot. She said, no. She said there was just something about it. So I drove over to the yoga studio and picked it up and didn't do the yoga and took it home. And I was in the preparation for writing Wishes Fulfilled about a year ago. It was about this big around, maybe 2 by 2, wrapped in gold paper with a gold, it was like from King Midas, it was with gold ribbon on it and so on. And I don't have a dining room table because it's a sacred space. I have so many sacred things in there. We don't eat at a dining room table in my place. We eat on the floor on a little thing like this. That's just the way we do it, despite my kids telling me they want to change all of that around. We don't. So we have this little table that I sit in, and I put it there, and I looked at this, and I looked at it, and I looked at it. A week would go by, and I think, well, I'm just going to have to put it on that pile of things I'm not going to ever get to. And then I didn't. And finally, one day, something spoke to me, and it said, open this. And it was the I Am Discourses. It looks like this. In fact, this is it. It was channeled things that came back in the 1930s by St. Germain. So I opened it up, and I read a few pages, and I said, well, this is interesting, but, I'm writing something else, and I don't want to. And then it just had one of those pulls to it that it was like a calling. Just like the book that I told you I've been reading all day today from this French physicist. It's just a calling. And when you feel it and you sense it and you know that you're onto something, that's what this was. So the I Am Discourses are basically, they come from the original. Now, I'm going to just give you this is really important for you to be able to get this. If you go back into the Torah is one of the most, if not the most, ancient spiritual text still in its original form. It's the first 5 books of the Old Testament, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus. Lao Tzu wrote the Tao Te Ching, the book that I ask you to carry with you in 81 little verses, in the year 520 BC, approximately. The Torah was written 800 years before that, 1,300 years before the birth of Christ. You have to understand how far back that is. That would be like going back now to the year 800 to look at these spiritual texts. That's how far back we go. So from the birth of Christ, we're going back 1,300 years, and there's a story as reported in the Torah, in Exodus, in the book of Exodus, and it's the story of Moses. And most of you know the story of Moses, but let me just fill you in for a moment. A little Bible history for just 2 minutes. Moses was a baby who was born to an Israelite slave. The Pharaoh at that time in Egypt had ordered all male babies that were born to be drowned in the Nile River. This mother of this little baby could not stand the idea of drowning her baby, but the soldiers were coming, and they were drowning them if you didn't do it yourself. And in those days, I guess the Pharaoh's word was the Pharaoh's word. So she wrapped her baby up and put it in a waterproof basket and floated it down the Nile, just hoping that something better would happen to it other than having it drowned by the Pharaoh's soldiers. And as the world would have it, baby was picked up by a woman who happened to be the Pharaoh's daughter. And Moses was raised as a granddaughter of the Pharaoh who had ordered all of these slaves to be killed. About the age of 17 or 18, and he was a favorite, but he got into a conflict with one of the soldiers who was mistreating an Israelite, and he murdered this soldier. And the Pharaoh hadn't found out about it, but he knew that when he did, his life would be ended, that he would be executed for this. So he ran away and he escaped, and he went to a place called the Sinai. And he lived there, married a woman named Zipporah, and lived with her, had children, was a shepherd, and lived out there on the Sinai, raising his family for 40 years. And one day he's out there on the Sinai, and he comes across a burning bush. And this burning bush is continuing to burn, but it's not being consumed. And so he hears a voice coming from this burning bush, legend tells us. And it is God speaking. And it is the only place in all of the spiritual literature wherein God gives his name. And I brought it with me to share with you the exact words. It's in Exodus 3. So when the Lord saw that his turn to look, God called to him from the midst of this bush and said to Moses, Moses, Moses. And Moses' only words to God were, Here I am. Here I am. Then he said, do not draw near this place. Take your sandals off of your feet, for this place where you stand is holy ground. Then 11 verses later, Moses says to God, but God's telling Moses this story, and he's telling him, you're to go to Egypt. You are to free all of your people who are enslaved. And Moses, now he's talking to a burning bush that isn't consumed, all right? And he said, but, I'll read it to you. He said, Moses says to God, but who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and that I should bring the children of Israel out of Egypt? So he said, well, I will certainly be with you, and this shall be a sign to you that I have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God on this mountain. Then Moses says to God, indeed, but when I come to the children of Israel and I say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they say to me, what is his name? What shall I say to them? And God said to Moses, I am that I am. And he said, thus you shall say to the children of Israel, I am has sent me to you. I am. Moreover, God said to Moses, you shall say to the children of Israel, this is my name forever, and this is my memorial to all generations. To all generations, which means our generation. It means us. I am that I am is the name of God. Now, the significant thing about that is that every time you use the words I am, you are saying the name of God. That is your name. You use it all the time. In the book of Joel, it says, let the weak say, I am strong. And virtually everything that Jesus said of significance, including labeling God's name as I am in the book of John, he says, I am the truth, the way, and the life. I am the door that no man closes. I am the resurrection. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. I am, using the name of God. Now, you have a name that you use all the time, and it's called I am. And every time you use this name and place before it something that God would not be able to say, this is blasphemy. This is taking God's name in vain. When you say, I am weak, I am poor, I am sad, I am sick, I am unable, I am, could God say that? Now notice that when Moses asked him his name, God didn't say, my name is, I hope things work out for the best. He didn't say, my name is, I will be, I hope to become. He said, I am that I am. I am discourses were among the most powerful teachings that I have ever encountered. Now, that's 330 pages of very small print, and I have underlined it and read it many, many times and quoted from it, distilled most of it in the book that'll be out in March. It says here, I am is the activity of life. How strange it is that students, that's us, with sincere interest do not seem to get the true meaning of those two words. When you say and feel I am, you release the spring of eternal, everlasting life to flow on its way unmolested. In other words, you open wide the door to its natural flow. When you say I am not, you shut the door in the face of this mighty energy. I am is the full activity of God. Having placed before you so often the truth of God in action, I wish you to understand its first expression in individualization. The first expression of every individual, everywhere in the universe, either in spoken word, silent thought, or feeling is I am, recognizing its own conquering divinity. The student, you and me, endeavoring to understand and apply these mighty yet simple laws, must stand guard more strictly over his thoughts and expression, in word or otherwise. For every time you say, I am not, I cannot, I have not, you are, whether knowingly or unknowingly, throttling that great presence within you. This word I am, when you use it, is the name that God gave as his name, our Creator's name, for all future generations. And I'm asking you at this point now, as I go into the 5 principles for manifesting into your life in the last 20 minutes, I ask you to think about this idea of how you use the term I am. You may remember the first thing I said when I came out here was, I am well, I am perfect health. I am. And as a result of being able to say that and know that and recognize that every time I use the words I am, I want to be able to place into my consciousness the fact that I am speaking as God. Not a God that is of the ego, not a God that's better than anyone else. God, the spirit and the ego, the soul and the are always at war. Go on the internet and look up the 100 most spiritually influential people alive. 100 most spiritually influential people alive by Watkins. Look it up. You are listening tonight to the third most spiritually influential person alive according to this list. All right? That's something? And my spirit says, I'm not anybody better than anybody else. I'm equal with everyone. We're all God. We're all pieces of God. But my ego says, what do you mean, number 3? What's going on here? Who could possibly be more spiritually influential than you that's alive? And you look on the list, and there's 2 people ahead of me on the list. And my ego says, you got to take these 2 guys down. My spirit says, don't pay attention to that. We're all the same. We're all equal, right? So the 2 guys ahead of me, alive today, are Eckhart Tolle, number 1. And I just did 2 hours with him. That's streaming across the internet right now. You can find it I just did it last Saturday in Maui. He's done. I talked about this on the conversation, the dialogue that we had together. We had so much fun with it. Or the 2 of us could come together and take down the Dalai Lama. I think we can possibly do that. Yeah? And, of course, my ego says, it's really not fair. I mean, he had Oprah, and he was on for 20 weeks, and Oprah's only number 8 on the list anyway. Why? And my spirit says, ignore all of that. It's not relevant at all. This moment that Moses speaks to God, and God gives his name as I am that I am, is interesting because I came across this incredible thing. We have them here. It's called the Moses Code Frequency Meditation. And this is amazing. And I want you to really pay attention to that. I mean, think about this. There's 9 tracks on here. We're reproducing this in 3-track thing, but right now it's in track 8 and 9. What they have done is they went back into the actual Hebrew words that say I am that I am, and were able to match up the sound. That how they do this scientifically, I don't know, but the sound, you can meditate to the sound of the words that were spoken by God to Moses in I am that I am. And they explain how that is done in the Moses Code. So this is by James Twyman. It's number 8 and number 9. What I encourage you to do, I gave this to my kids, and I said, look, let's just do this meditation, because there's 2 20-minute meditations, track 8 and track 9. And when you put it on, it's the most divine sound you just have ever heard. When my daughter came to my room at 6:45 to bring me down here, I was in the midst of that, and I didn't hear the door open, I didn't hear them come in, I didn't hear anything. It's like I was in such an incredibly peaceful and perfect state. And track 8 is for a deeper meditation, and track 9 is for a lighter meditation. It's got a little bit of music accompanying with it. But the words, I am that. What I want you to do, this is very valuable for you, is whatever it is you would like to become, whatever you would like to attract into your life, the person that you would like to be, the relationship you would like to have, the job you would like to have, the prosperity you would like to have show up in your life, the consciousness that you would like to be living by. Write it down, seriously. Write it down on a piece of paper in a sentence or 2 and call it that at the top of the page, just that. And then when you do your meditation, when you put on track 8 and just begin to just meditate and use this as your inner mantra, I am that. Whatever is written on your page, whatever it might be, I am that. Which is what God said to Moses. And then I am. If it's on an out breath, you are sending that to God. If it's on an in breath, you are bringing it from God. It doesn't make any difference. It's I am that. I am that divine relationship. I am that prosperity. I am that happiness. I am that health. I am that healing. Whatever it might be. I am that I am. Just practice it. It's a meditation. When I did it with my kids, and I play it out loud and have them come in and sit down, and I light 3 white candles, and we do this little ritual thing. And at first they're just placating their old dad. You know, the leader of the band is tired, and his eyes are growing old, and so is his brain. So I just try it once. Just try it with me. The next day, they know I do it in my headphones or whatever. I do it every day. I do it consecutively. I do 40 minutes every day. My daughter Sage came to me, and she had her girlfriend Allie there. She said, could we do that meditation again today? I said, absolutely. We did it about 4 o'clock, and then the next day she said, we're planning our day around the meditation. They were there for 3 weeks. They did every single day. Now they downloaded it on their, whatever they download them on, those little things they stick in their ears and all of that, and do it on a regular basis. I am that I am. We're bringing it out in March as the Wishes Fulfilled I Am meditation. But just practice it and try it. So Elizabeth Barrett Browning wrote a wonderful little poem about that meeting of God and Moses. She said, earth's crammed with heaven, and every burning bush afire with God. And those who truly know take off their shoes, while the rest sit round it and pick blackberries. Take off your shoes as God instructed Moses to do, and just be at peace with it. And the 5 principles for manifesting based upon the awareness that I am God, meaning love, are these. The first is your imagination. Your imagination is the greatest gift that you have been given. Your imagination, everything that now exists in the universe was once imagined, which means that in order for something to exist, it must first be imagined. You have to free your imagination up and rebuild the foundation like René Descartes spoke about in the quote that I gave earlier that I read this morning. You must be able to toss out your concept of yourself, which is based on everything that you believe to be true, and walk down another street. And the other street is a street that says, I am God. I am not just a piece of God, I am altogether God. The rest of it is just all illusion. It's just all the coming and goingness of things. It's the tattered coat upon a stick. That I, who I am, that which looks out from behind my eyes, and with God, when you are aligned in God realization, the truth of it is that all things are possible. The day that I was diagnosed with leukemia, I came home to where I live on Maui, and sitting there on my front lawn was a woman who was waiting there for me because she wanted me to help her with her work. She's a nurse practitioner. Her name is Pam McDonald. She was here with me last year, and she's written a book that was really instrumental in helping me to rearrange my entire diet. It's called The Perfect Gene Diet. She claims that by the year 2040, the year I turn 100, there will be 1 out of every 3 Americans will have diabetes if we don't shift our consciousness. Alzheimer's has become an epidemic in our society. Most of you have family members or people that you know who in one way or another have this horrific kind of robbing us of our humanity disease, and it can all be shifted with our diets. It's called the Perfect Gene Diet. I went on the diet that she recommended, which is in harmony with my genetic blueprint, and as I did that and shifted, 2 of the 8 markers for leukemia returned to normal within 2 months. So your imagination is the thing that you have to be able to put a do not disturb sign in front of and say, no matter what it is that I place into my imagination, no one is going to be able to detract me from it. And be willing to put into your imagination anything at all that aligns with the notion that with God all things are possible. All things are possible. If you've been addicted to something for 20 years, if you've been overweight your whole life, if you've been poor your whole life, you've been saying, I am poor, I am fat, I am unworthy. You are using the name of God in vain. You must begin to say, I am healthy, I am happy, I am content, I am well-being, I am addiction-free, and be able to say it. Forget about what your senses tell you, you forget everything else. William Blake, the great poet, said, to see the world in a grain of sand and a heaven in a wildflower, to hold eternity in the palm of your hand and infinity in an hour, we are all led to believe a lie when we see with, not through the eye, which was born in a night to perish in a night, while the soul slept in beams of light. The soul. When you align your soul with what wants to expand and not be held back and push away all forces that will try to encumber you, will try to restrict you. Your soul is miserable when you're trying to live out somebody else's dharma, an idea of what you should be. You must be able to do it from within, and when you do, the most amazing things begin to happen. Place it into your imagination. The second of these principles, I call it living from the end. And there's an observation from the New Testament that says, in the presence of him whom he believed God, who gives life to the dead, and calls, and these are the most important words, I think, in Romans, the book of Romans 4:17, and calls these things which do not exist as though they did. This is the secret. This is what I've been reading about all day about time. You've got to be able to say not only that I am perfect health, I am well, I am prosperous, I am employed, I am whatever it is that if you would like to place into your imagination, you have to ignore everything that comes your way that conflicts with that, including your own senses. Most importantly, what your eyes and your ears and the reports tell you. You must be able to hold firm this idea and call things as God, and you are God, calls things which do not exist as though they did. And the third principle here is called assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Each of these is a chapter in the book. I'm going through them in a few moments. Each of them is a segment on the PBS special. I'll see how much of it gets on. Assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. This is so significant because your feelings
are beyond your intellect. Your feeling is what you experience in your body. And when you assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, you are taking over your subconscious mind. Your subconscious mind is the mind that does 96 to 97% of everything that you do. How do you think you got here today? You got in your cars, or you got on a plane and you drove here, and you got, did you think about what you were doing when you were driving? Did you think, I got to put my foot on the brake, I got to slow it down? You drive all over. You could drive all the way across the country and never have one conscious thought about it. Your conscious mind is used to program your subconscious mind. Your subconscious mind is amenable to suggestions. Your subconscious mind doesn't care whether you're right or wrong, whether it's good or bad. It only accepts everything that you place into it. Hey, I'm 71 years old. At the age of 18, I was in the Navy. They sent me to Bainbridge, Maryland, to become a radioman cryptographer. And for 3 weeks, my conscious mind was programmed for an hour a day to learn Morse code. And I sat in front of a typewriter and I did Morse code an hour a day. That was 51 years ago. I have never used Morse code since. Here's the alphabet. Da 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 da. That's A through P. I could go on with this. Every time I'm in a movie theater, my kids will say, "Dad, will you stop with the Morse code? Because there's an exit sign up there. It's da 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 da." And I'm tapping it away. My subconscious mind, after all these years that it was programmed, it's still doing the da-da-dits, the da-dits, the da-dits. I can't get it out of there. Do you know how many da-da-dits, da-da-dits, da-da-dits that you have? Here they are. I can't do this. I'm not very attractive. I'm not intelligent. I'm poor. I'm not allowed to have this. I'm not worthy of this. Da-da-dit, da-da-dit. I can't make this thing happen. Da-da-dit. I can't create miracles. Da-da-dit. I can't get over a hill. Your subconscious mind has been programmed. It doesn't take very much to get it in there. Getting it out of there is like one of the most crucial things that you can do. What you have to do, the fourth principle, is attention. You have to begin to pay attention to everything that comes at you that's involved with what's in your subconscious mind. If you're going in for a little dot to be removed from your chin and somebody's telling you your penis is going to fall off, you want to get that in the trash real fast, right? I mean, Jill Clayburgh, the great actress, just passed away. She passed away from the same kind of leukemia that I have. I had about 11 different people send me a picture of her and tell me, she was younger than you. And is that what I want to hear? Is that what I want to program my subconscious mind to begin to believe? I'm watching TV and the newscaster, Brian Williams, is on there. He said, "We're going away. We'll be right back. And when we come back, we're going to give the 10 early warning signs for Alzheimer's disease." Well, that's what I want to write down. I want to make sure I carry those with. Do you ever walk into a room and forget what you walked in there for? I've been doing that since I was 12. Do I want to program myself? Your subconscious mind is always getting things thrown at it to take out of your consciousness the things that you have placed in there that you want to manifest and attract for yourself in your life. When you use the words "I am," you are using the name of God. When you act and live from that place and call things that do not exist as if they did, and live from that and base how you feel and how your life is going on how you feel and your connection to God rather than on what somebody else tells you. I mean, when Anita came back, the doctors were insistent they couldn't find any cancer in her body after 4.5 weeks. And they were looking for a lymph node, and they couldn't even find one big enough. And they called the oncologist. They said, "Well, find anyone, because cancer has to be in her body." She had trillions of cancer cells in there. But she had a different awareness within herself. She had already seen herself as healed. And that's what and she said, you can take the samples if you want, but you're not going to find anything. I've already seen my body is healed. This is an amazing saint that is walking among us. I am so honored to have her in my life. The fifth principle is really crucial here. And I call it the last 5 minutes of your day. And this is something you can do tonight. And I want to leave you with this and have you really, really live with this. And this is, your subconscious mind is most comfortable when it is with your unconscious mind. Your unconscious mind is the time that you spend while you are asleep, especially in your dream state, especially in your REM state, your rapid eye movement state. Now, your subconscious mind had so many suggestions thrown at it from your parents, their parents, their parents, from your culture, from your history, from your religion, your school, all of this stuff that I've been talking about for the last 3 hours, you have had programmed into you about what can and can't happen. And the fact is, with God, all things are possible. All things. A person a few hours from taking her last breath can be cancer-free. The doctors can't explain it. The medical community can't explain it. It doesn't make any difference. It is possible. All things are possible. Leaves nothing out. And the only way you can get to that place is to have this awareness of I am already what I have placed into my imagination, and what my senses tell me, what my eyes and ears tell me, what your reports tell me, what anybody else says. What part of I am well is it that you don't understand? But you don't have to complain, you don't have to explain, you don't have to make anybody else believe it. You just have to have this knowing. Now, the last 5 minutes before you go to bed this is the most important 5 minutes of your day. You are now preparing yourself to marinate for the next 8 hours in your subconscious and unconscious mind. That's where you're headed in the next 5 minutes. And you get into that dreamy kind of, you're half awake and half asleep. And your subconscious mind cannot make a distinction between what you place there in terms of how you feel and what is happening to you in your daily life. So if you use your last 5 minutes of the day to go over all of the things that you don't like and that you don't want and that didn't work out for you and that was unfortunate for you and who you're pissed off at, and you just go through all of this litany, which most of you do, this is your, nobody can bother me now. Now I can really go through and to convince everybody I have a right to be miserable. And you're defending your right to be miserable and why you're unhappy and why you're poor and why the economy is in the toilet and why, and all of this, you go through all of that instead of, now listen, this is right, this is why I can't wait to hear from the far right on this. In a dream, this is from the book of Job, Job 33, verses 15 and 16. In a dream, in a vision of the night, when deep sleep falls upon men, while slumbering in their beds, then he opens the ears of men and seals their instruction. Then he opens your ears while you're in your unconscious state and seals your instruction. I didn't write this. So you want to make sure that as you're going into the last 5 minutes of the day, that you are reviewing all of your I ams. I am happy. I am in a great relationship. I am prosperous. I am thin. I am happy. I am content. I am fulfilled. I am perfect health. I am God. I am God. I am that. I am. And just keep saying it and saying it. And now you're 8 hours and your ears are about to be opened and your instructions are going to be sealed and your universal subconscious mind, your one subconscious mind is going to wake up the next morning, come into this level of consciousness that we're in, and there's only one universal subconscious mind. We're all using it. There's 2,000 individuals in here. There's one mind, folks. There's only one mind. We are all God. We are all using this mind of God in one way or another. Some use it for our ego, where we've edged God out, ego, we've edged God out, and other of us are using it to stay in a God-realized state. But you now come back and you join the universal subconscious mind, which offers you the opportunity to be a creator in your life. You can create anything because you are God. And you are now connected to God. And now the universe, God consciousness, divine mind, begins to offer you up experiences that match up to what you have placed into your own individual subconscious mind. This is how it works. This is the simple system. You get that automatic habitual mind of yours aligned with God consciousness, and all things are possible. And then you live from that, and then someone like a John of God comes. So as you prepare yourself for being in this state of God consciousness, you go into a place in your imagination where there's absolutely no limitations to what you place. Now, this is what I have been doing after I started reading and Neville and U.S. Anderson and the Three Magic Words. It began to occur to me that I had bought into and saying things like, I am sick. I would even say, in my talks, I have leukemia. You may have even heard me say it. And it was like, I didn't even realize that when I was saying that, I was asking the universal subconscious mind to give me experiences that match up to this I am that I've placed into my imagination, into my mind. Whereas when I say I am well, I am perfect health, I am offering the universal subconscious mind an opportunity to give me experiences that match up to that, because that's God speaking. And it isn't like I'm saying here, you just have to follow what I say and you're never going to die. I mean, life itself is a sexually transmitted terminal disease, you know. That's not a surprise to any of us, all right? But the key is to live every single day that you have from a place of well-being, from a place of contentment, and not be focused on what's missing, what's wrong, what used to be, what others tell you, what others want for you, but instead using your imagination and allowing the universal subconscious mind. And a woman, a doctor in California, her name's Reina Piskova, and she's a medical doctor, an eye surgeon. She was going down to Abadiânia in Brazil. She wanted me to go with her because she knew about this leukemia diagnosis, and she felt that this being down there who has treated some 25 million people without any anesthesia. Oprah did a whole show on this. They took a whole team of people from Harvard to debunk this person, and they all became devotees. And they now are out there talking about this man. I just spent 3 days with him in upstate New York at the Omega Institute, which were life-changing days. Anyway, I didn't go to Brazil because I was writing this book, and I really didn't realize at the time that everything I was writing about I needed to experience. So she got down there, and she called me up, and she went to John of God, and she showed, I had 4 pictures taken of me, from the front, from the back, from both sides, all dressed in white. Now, this is weird, folks, and I'm going to leave you with a really weird story here, okay? And remember what I said at the opening, have a mind that's open to everything, attached nowhere. All right. I'm going along with Reina because she's been down there twice before. She's really into this, and, you know, she's very nice. I thought it was nice of her to invite me, but I wasn't going to Brazil. I had the pictures taken. I did what I was told. She took the pictures to John of God and asked him if he would do surgery on me. She thinks that my voice is so important she doesn't want me to leave yet. That's Reina's perspective. He looked at the pictures and said, no, it's not possible. He cannot be treated because he's not taking the herbs, and you have to be taking these special herbs and drinking this blessed holy water. Reina got in a car. She went to a FedEx office, got the herbs, had them FedExed to me all the way to Maui. 3 days later, they arrive on a Tuesday. I take 3 on Tuesday. I take 3 on Wednesday. And I have my picture retaken, front, back, side, doing everything that she's telling me to do, sort of placating her and humoring her. But open to it as well, because I've always been open to these kinds of things. I've always been attracted to extraordinariness rather than ordinariness. He said, yes, you can have your surgery. You'll have your surgery. It'll be Thursday morning. He does surgery on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Thursday morning, 7 a.m. my time, 2 o'clock Brazil time. And she said, so when you get up, she said, you'll have the surgery. I don't know how long it'll be. It's usually just a few moments. And John of God doesn't do this surgery. He has these entities. I know. It's okay. That enter his body. You can, by the way, go on YouTube and check out some of the things that you'll see. It was amazing to see that Harvard surgeon go down there and saying, nothing in my experience allows me to even explain what is happening here. His heart was closed, and all of a sudden it started bleeding underneath his heart, and they couldn't stop the bleeding, and he had no bleeding disorder. And the woman there in Portuguese said to him, John of God just informed me that your heart has been closed, and they have opened it now. This was a medical doctor from Harvard who now talks about healing goes way beyond what medicine has to offer us. So 7 o'clock in the morning comes, and I do the surgery in the middle of the night. She told me anything could happen during the night. You just don't know. She told me to take things off the top shelves because sometimes it's like a volcano or a hurricane or something going in there, or an earthquake. So I got up at 7 o'clock that morning, and she called me. She said, he sat with your picture for 40 minutes. She said, I've never seen him ever do this before. She was him and I and you. This is a guy where maybe 4,000 or 5,000 people a day come through Abadiânia, and he's never charged anybody for this healing. He's an amazing, amazing being. He's a gemologist. He just deals in minerals and so on. He's about my age. He's about 2 years younger than I am. And he knows who these entities are, former doctors, and some say it's even Jesus who's doing this work. So 7 o'clock came, and she called. She said, now, you're going to have to go back to bed. You've had surgery for 40 minutes. She said, this is real surgery. Now, she's a surgeon herself, an eye surgeon. I said, okay, Reina, But when I hung up, I said to my kids, my daughter Serena and my son Sam were there, I said, I'm going for a walk. And she said, don't go for a walk. She said, it's no different than if you've had your gallbladder removed. She said, you've had very serious surgery. I didn't feel anything. So I said, I'm going for a walk. She said, you are to sleep for 24 hours. And if you don't sleep for those 24 hours, you will be anesthetized and made to go to sleep. I said, right. So I went for a walk. I walked down the stairs, got about 100 yards from my front door, and I collapsed. I couldn't get up. I was just so sick. I finally almost crawled back up to my apartment, came in, and I just said to my daughter, I said, honey, I am so sick. I'm going to bed. And I had slept 8 hours the night before. I was in bed for a week. I ate a little bit of soup. I drank the holy water, the blessed water that had been sent up to me. And I'm shortening this because of the time. So 7 days go by, and Raina said, you will have, are you ready? You will have your sutures removed on the 28th. I know this, but my date, because it was my mother's 91st birthday, the 21st of April. She said on the 28th, on Thursday night, you will have your sutures removed. I said, the only problem is I don't have any sutures. I don't know what she said, no, they're invisible sutures. But they will be, the entities will come into your room during the night and take these sutures out. The nice thing about 71 is you can sound as crazy as a loon up here, and it's just all okay. But it isn't crazy, and I say that only with tongue-in-cheek, because it's very profound and very powerful. So that night came, and I did everything that I was told to do. I dressed in white. I didn't eat any spiced foods. I didn't have any pepper, no sex, no activity of any kind, no walking, no, it's just resting and so on. Ate the foods I was supposed to, did everything I was supposed to. So 7 o'clock in the morning, and I had just bought a brand new watch that my daughter had insisted that I get. It's called a Panerai, a watch that is guaranteed, like an atomic watch, to never lose or gain a second. All right, I wore that to bed that night. 7 o'clock the next morning, I wake up, 8 hours I'd been in bed, and I woke up. I felt so strange, but I couldn't explain what it was. And I walked out, and I got a phone call from my friend Carrie, and she said, how did it go? I said, well, it's only 7 o'clock. I said, it's only 7 o'clock. I'm not supposed to even know anything before that. She said, no, it's not 7 o'clock. It's 8:30 or it's 8:20. I said, no, you got it wrong. I said, it says right here, it's 7:05 is what. She said, it's 8:25. I'm at the airport. I've got to fly to Honolulu. I'm getting ready to board a plane. During the night, this watch that had never lost or gained a second lost 80 minutes. And I came out, and I was just so groggy. And my son looked at me and he said, what were you doing in there last night? I said, I just went to sleep. He said, no. He said, your eye, it looks like someone has taken and scraped the inside of your eye. The inside of my right eye was all scraped on the inside. And there was just a tiny little pupil dot in there, like I had been doing serious drugs all night. And I said, I don't know. I said, but I just think you guys are so beautiful. I just love you. Did I ever tell you how much I love you? My son's going, whoa, what? From that moment on, about 3 days later in my meditation, I was told, you don't have to run away from yoga any longer. You are healed. You can do yoga. I went and said, instead of going for a walk, just go to yoga. And I went to the yoga studio, and I picked up where I had left off 11 months before. I don't know if any of you know Bikram yoga, but it's a very intense 90-minute heavy-duty workout for someone 71, let alone for anyone. All right? So I was back doing it. I now do it 5 or 6 days a week. My birthday was a few days later. I'd had the experience that I told you about, and I decided I was going to see John of God up at Rhinebeck at Omega in September. And I went there, and there were 1,500 people a day, all dressed in white. It was really, honestly, for 3 days, it was like being in heaven. I think the poet was right, Elizabeth Barrett Browning. Earth's crammed with heaven. This was like heaven. Everybody's dressed in white. Everybody ate vegetarian food. There was a beautiful lake there. I swam across it every day. Everybody just was kind and loving to each other. It was just so peaceful and so beautiful and just so wonderful. And everybody was just, and I was so in love. I was just so happy with, and it's been that way since this happened. It was almost as if I just see the world totally different than I've ever seen it before. Every single one of you just looks so beautiful to me. I'm just in that state and always in that. And I've been giving almost everything I get. And the ironic part of it is that more keeps coming and more keeps coming. It's just been this most miraculous, phenomenal journey. So I got up there, and Skip, the guy who runs the whole place, he said, I'm not going to, when you walk by John of God, now 1,500 people a day are walking by him up there, so they just walk by, and he'll just say, go to this place, or have a blessing, or go to the current room and observe my healings and interventions and so on. And they didn't introduce me as any particular special person of any kind. They just put me in the line. I walked up, and John of God looked up at me, And in Portuguese, he said, big smile, he said, "You are well. I want you to," he asked me in Portuguese, how long are you going to be here? And I said, "Until Wednesday." He said, "I would like you to observe every one of my spiritual interventions and have you sat there." And I meditated all day Monday, all day Tuesday, and Wednesday morning, and watched as these various people were there. I was up there with some friends who were very, very sick, some people who got some very serious illnesses. I saw one man walk in there with a cane, and he just sort of hobbled up, and John of God just said, "You don't need that stick." And they took his stick away, and he went and he said, "Sit there." And then when he had everybody get up, he went to go get his stick, and the lady said, "You don't need the stick anymore." And he walked out like I walk out. I watched it. I saw the whole thing happen. Everyone who goes there isn't healed, and so on. But the infusion of love, the thing that you were describing over there that you said you wrote an article about, it's that overwhelming sense. It's an amazing story. It's the story of a man named John Newton who was a slave ship holder. John Newton, 1735-36, he had a boatload filled with human beings to be sold into slavery from Senegal to Columbia, South Carolina. Crosses the ocean. And in the midst of his crossing runs into a hurricane, they say, and he feels he's going to die and everyone on the ship is going to die. And he hears one of the men who's tied up underneath the hold, his voice. And his voice has got this melodic kind of allure to it. And he's listening to that and to the accompaniment of one of the African men that is to be sold into slavery. He writes down the words of a song on the back of an envelope. And it became, not only, what happened is after he wrote the words down to the song, they thought they were all going to die. The next day, the storm cleared, and he turned his ship around, and he went back to Africa. And he released all of the people that were on the ship, and he went from there to Bristol in England. And for the next 55 years, John Newton became the spokesperson, the most ardent spokesperson for the abolition of slavery. He went from Saul to Paul. You know, Paul, who wrote 80% of the New Testament, was Saul of Tarsus, a man who crucified and killed Christians by the hundreds until he had this conversion on the road to Damascus in one instant. And that's what I'm saying to you here tonight. A talk like this, hearing this information, knowing who you are, that you are not this body, knowing the answer to the question, who am I, is I am God. And our greatest teachers have told us, including Jesus Christ. I once was lost, and now I'm found. I got rid of that ego. Tagore put it so beautifully. Rabindranath Tagore, the great Indian poet, talking about the ego. He said, "I went out alone on my way to my tryst, but who is this me in the dark? I step aside to avoid his presence, but I escape him not. He makes the dust rise from the earth with his swagger. He adds his loud voice to every word I utter. He is my own little self, my Lord. He knows no shame, but I am ashamed to come to thy door in his company." See, you got a choice, folks, always, as the poet tells us. You can either be a host to God or a hostage to your ego. It's up to you. God bless you.
To watch another amazing Wayne Dyer video, check it out right there next to me. I think you'll love it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.
When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. The world becomes a different world when you change the way you look at it. If you believe you live in a depressing world,